Hello, you're watching BTVA's Business Nigeria for today, Wednesday, December 2nd. And I am TUNJI Andrews. Now, on the show today, the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index improves slightly in October, according to FBN Capital, FBN Quest, whichever one you prefer. And a supplementary budget of 574 billion was passed by the National Assembly yesterday. More on this in a bit, but you're watching Business Nigeria. But first, let's go to the top stories. Michael, could you help us with the top stories?
Thank you very much, TUNJI. And what's making the stories for the headlines today? The DMO urges caution on borrowings over looming debt limits. The Debt Management Office, DMO, has cautioned the federal government against brokering new debt deals, given the approaching debt service threshold. Nigeria's sustainable debt threshold showed that as at December 2014, debt service to revenue ratio had hit 25.2% against the maximum of 28%. That is according to the DG of the DMO, Abraham Wankwo. NNPC records 304.18 billion naira operating revenue in 2 months. The monthly financial numbers of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, puts the operating revenue after subsidy for the month of September and October, respectively, at 304.18 billion naira. The company, however, recorded operating deficits of 58.7 billion naira for both months, as against the monthly surplus of 38.91 billion naira. PZ shareholders approved merger of 3 firms. Shareholders of PZ Cussons Nigeria PLC, PZ Tars Limited and PZ Power Company Limited have agreed to merge the 3 companies. The merger is aimed at driving improved operation efficiencies, cost-saving, managerial efficiencies and reduced transfer pricing complications. Now over to you, TUNJI.
Thank you, Michael. It's also important to note that the debt service to revenue would significantly go lower. That is if the talk about the 2016 budget being around 7 to 8 trillion has any truth to it. But going on, PMI comes in slightly higher at 54.4 points in November. That is from the Purchasing Managers Index from FBN Quest. Now, according to FBN Quest, the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index showed modest improvement in the headline, reading 54.4 from 52.6. The manufacturing sector contracted in Q3 to 1.8% from 3.4% in the previous quarter. So why are we seeing this level of improvement despite all the macroeconomic pointers? ADEGBOYEGA OLATUNDE and OLUWATSOIN joins me for more of this. Boyega, let's start with looking at the fact that, we've been seeing we've seen Q1 numbers, Q2 numbers, Q3 numbers, and generally we've seen a lot of weakness in the manufacturing space. Does this show a disconnect, really? Because this report says manufacturing did slightly better in this month. And we've been seeing numbers showing that there's been continued weakness in that sector, and it's been continuously getting worse.
Remember, year on year, your GDP for the 3rd quarter went up. So that's the first thing I think we should note. Now, secondly, taking a look at both the GDP, manufacturing GDP for the 2nd quarter and 3rd quarter, it was actually a 7.4% increase. So based on looking at the figures of the various sectors within those sectors. So you basically did see that. Now, you also should note that this index basically has 5 sub-indices. Now, those 5 sub-indices cover things like output, where you're measuring electricity generation and all that. It has employment, where you're measuring, obviously, number of employees who have either gained or lost jobs within that sector. Mm-hmm. You have new orders, where you're basically looking at things like how tariffs affect order generations within these companies. You have supplier purchases, and you also have stock repurchases. You know, so
but does that say that things have changed, though? Josie, we have seen issues with this manufacturers complaining about getting FX, with issues with the FX regime. I mean, there's been a lot of complaining from that sector.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's worthy to know that, number one, the 50 point is a neutral point. So, yes, it's 54 point something. It's not exactly fantastic or over the top. It's just slightly more than neutral. And also, still speaking about some of the indices, it pointed out that all the sub-indices closed positive. That is inclusive of employment. However, the data from the unemployment board has shown us a steady climb in unemployment rate. So I want to believe that maybe the unemployment situation in the manufacturing sector has been positive and is not reflective of what happens in the entire market, because I would have expected the employment data in that space to close, maybe not to be as close in the positive territory.
Bringing the story back, I was reading a report and it said that it's projection, every inquest is projecting, because of this numbers, saying that Q4 numbers in terms of GDP will be slightly higher than the 2.8% we saw in the third quarter. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. If you look at it from the point of seasonality, first and foremost, you should expect that food and beverages, for instance, is a very large proportion. It is responsible for in between 37 to about 45% of the manufacturing GDP. And it is affected significantly by seasonality.
Tosi, lower jobs, lower consumer spending. So how are people going to buy those beverages?
But I mean, I mean, if you look at the chart, it always happens. The Q4 is always higher. It always closes.
For food and beverages.
Food and beverages, and just even the general activity in the air, it's always a better quarter than the rest of the year. So
well,
I do agree.
Well, looking at the numbers, because we know that FBN Quest is measuring, has 5 indicators to measure the Purchasing Managers Index, but I have here from the National Bureau of Statistics, which has 13 activities which it uses to capture that sector. So maybe there might be a difference there's obviously a difference in methodology, so we might be seeing 2 different ways to which it is being captured. But I think we'll continue to follow that story, especially the predictions by FBN Quest saying that Q4 GDP would rise slightly.
Tunji, to actually clarify your point, regarding the constituents of the manufacturing GDP, you should note that one of the key things that was responsible for that growth was oil refining. Oil refining came in at almost about triple what it was the previous quarter. So that was one of the key drivers.
Why though, basically? Because I need to ask that. Is it that we had new refineries? Because we didn't.
No, surprisingly, it was second quarter was 28, third quarter was 81. So I was shocked by that growth too. I think it's that you're seeing some of the basic reforms that we put in place start to bear fruit.
Okay, I guess also the Port Harcourt refinery might have had something to do with that too. Anyways, we'll continue to follow that story. Thank you, Tosi. Thank you, ADEGBOYEGA, for that. Let's check in on the markets quickly. We'll be right back. This is still Business Nigeria. Now, the Senate and the House of Representatives have passed the supplementary budget for 574 billion naira. And subsidy payments takes 522.2 billion of this. While this might halt the 1 month fuel scarcity, how sustainable is this? Joining me on the desk is BTVA's current affairs reporter, Michael Uchegbu. Welcome to the show, Michael. Now, we have seen this passed. I'm going to hear a lot of cheers from Nigerians thanking God, finally, that this fuel scarcity might be over. But looking at it going forward, I mean, we had a budget for fuel subsidy in the 2015 budget. Now this is a supplementary budget. Is this sustainable, though?
Well, if you look at the landing rate for petrol, you look at it's about 13.06. Now, if you multiply that by the amount estimated,
we're looking at several millions or billions,
billions of naira, right? Now, the marketers are saying that they already received about 220-something billion naira, and they're still waiting for the outstanding of 420-something billion outstanding, which, with the approval, with the passing of this on the Senate, it's good news, because right now we can now begin to see reduced fuel scarcity. That's what we're hoping that this will translate into.
All right, looking at it now, 2016, let's assume that it would be in the 2016 budget. I mean, going forward, are we going to continue seeing supplementary budgets year on year, the way we've seen it in this year? I mean, it was in 2014, it was in 2013. Are we going to see it in 2016?
First of all, how much has been invested in subsidy for 2015? Now we're looking at an initial 690-something billion. That's about from the 220-something billion that has already been paid to the marketed, and the outstanding, which will now, according to the Minister of State for Petroleum, Ibe Kachko, which will now be paid into the account of the marketers from next week, about 400-something billion naira, plus the additional 108.9 billion, which they gave reasons to, just in case if anything happens in the foreign exchange rates, and they wouldn't want a situation where we'll not have another long queues and fuel scarcity. So the 108.9 will cover all those issues. Exactly. So when you sum this up, it's amounting close to about 700 and something billion naira alone for 2015 on subsidy. Now, moving forward, you're looking at the government who said that they want to cut costs, right? I mean, when you look at the figures, it's about 19% of the years of 4.something trillion, which is 2015's budget alone.
True.
If the government is actually looking at
cutting
7 to 8 trillion of next year's budget, and it would make provisions for the subsidies. Now you're looking close to about 1.something billion trillion of that particular budget. So I don't know, considering how much it's involved, I don't think that's sustainable.
Well, the most important thing is that you and I do get fuel. I need to get fuel on my way back. Great. Thank you very much, Michael, for joining us on the desk. And thank you for being with us on Business Nigeria today. I am TUNJI Andrews, and until next time, keep doing business, Nigeria.